In my last theory, I talked about the truth behind the staff bots, and with that out of the way, there's only two more, or kind of three more mysteries in Security Breach that I need to talk about for videos. This video will be surrounding Burntrap and the Blob and what we might be seeing of them in the future. We're going to try and completely solve what they are and who possesses them. The Blob is a lot more debated than Burntrap, mostly because Burntrap isn't really debated all that much at all, but the lore surrounding both these characters is really interesting. I've also already made a video talking about Burntrap and his origin, so you can go check that out if you want. In terms of Burntrap, this video is more going to be like about what we're going to see in the future with Burntrap and also for the Blob. I'll be talking about the Blob for the majority of the video though, but towards the end that's when I'm going to talk about the future of both of them. The Blob and Burntrap are both very interesting characters, which is why in this video we're going to be trying to solve them. So now, let's get started.
Dreadfully, terribly, something is amiss. But don't you mind the feeling, it's all made up in your head. Destiny's melody calling out to me. But what I need from you is to come closer to the edge.
For a long time, I've had the idea that Eleanor is meant to show that some baby-like character will be the future villain of FNaF. Considering it now seems that the FNaF 6 fire doesn't work, and what Eleanor does in the books, using illusion discs like Baby in the Fourth Closet, being a master manipulator like Baby is in both Cislocation and again the Fourth Closet, stealing characters' identities like Baby does with Mike in Cislocation and Charlie in the Fourth Closet, and also just the general design of being a white and red humanoid animatronic with green eyes and pigtails just like Baby, it seems very likely that Elizabeth could be the future villain that Eleanor is representing. It's very clear that Eleanor in the novels, or in the Phasma Frights series, is not Elizabeth, but what she represents, Baby, is Elizabeth, so it really seems like she's trying to show that Elizabeth, or like in some kind of new body, will be the future villain. In the last video, I was suggesting that the future villain would be Elizabeth in a new body, and I suggested that it could be a staff bot, because it would make sense story-wise why Elizabeth's spirit would be in the staff bots, and it would make sense considering that there are a lot of staff bots down in the sewer and in the sticky note room, which very much seems to be Elizabeth. MattBat suggested it to be Gregory waking up as the robot bite victim, but even if Gregory is a robot, I don't think that makes sense because he very clearly believes that he is a human.
I don't want to be crushed and twisted into a meat pretzel.
So I think it's pretty likely that Elizabeth is the one in the sticky note room. As for her being in the staff bots, I think that's completely logical, but a staff bot being the one to become the game equivalent of Eleanor is kinda meh. I think it's a bit silly, but the evidence is there. I'd just say that Elizabeth is definitely still around and in a new body, but it doesn't necessarily have to be the staff bot that she uses to become a full-on villain. People often like to post my videos in Fredcourt and usually make fun of them, but sometimes just in order to make my theory sound dumber than it actually is, they manipulate my words. Some people said that I was using In the Flesh to prove the staff bot is the Eleanor of the games, but that's not what I was saying. I wasn't saying that In the Flesh proved that point, I was just saying that In the Flesh is just kind of a proof of concept, showing that it happening is possible. Elizabeth still being around by the time of Security Breach still seems clear to me, but her being in the Blob isn't very likely. The fact that hers and the puppet's eyes don't glow seems to imply that they aren't in the Blob, but there is another explanation for that as well. But Charlotte being in the Blob does have some evidence, while nothing really suggests that Elizabeth is in here. So in actuality, what is the Blob? Basically, it's exactly what basically everyone's first thought for it was. I feel like people really overcomplicate the Blob, but to me, it's clear that the Blob is Molten Freddy. Even if you are to believe that the Blob doesn't contain the spirits Molten Freddy did, it's still clear that the Blob itself is Molten Freddy. Although it looks different to how Molten Freddy does, it is still an amalgamation of animatronics together in a tangle of wires with a Funtime Freddy head that controls the body and is what jump scares you. It is underneath the burned down FNaF 6 pizzeria where we last saw Molten Freddy and attacks William. Molten Freddy was possessed by all the 5 spirits of the missing children incident victims who were killed by William, which would explain why the Blob attacks Afton, their killer. For more evidence that the Blob contains the spirit of the missing children, let's turn to the novel trilogy. The novel trilogy, and more specifically the Twisted Ones in the Fourth Closet, have a lot of parallels to Security Breach. Some people question why I included the Twisted Ones in my Ruined fan pre-write, and I'll admit I did kind of shoehorn that in there, but it was because of the connection between the Twisted Ones and the Fourth Closet to Security Breach. In the Twisted Ones and in Security Breach, William is trapped underneath a wrecked Freddy's location that had a mall built on top of it. Not only that, but he is also psychically controlling animatronics from under there. Also, if you believe that Gregory is a robot, that also matches up, considering if it's true, then in both cases William is making animatronics go after a robot human that ends up confronting him in the end. And also the fact that, the protagonist is a robot. There's also the absence of one of the main animatronics, despite us knowing that character did exist, i.e. Twisted Chica and Glamrock Bonnie, who we know existed in the Twisted Ones, but we never actually see them directly. Monty also loses his legs in Security Breach, and in the Twisted Ones, the first appearance of Twisted Foxy has him stuck in the ground, neither of his legs visible. And finally, there's a wolf in both games, and Twisted Wolf and Roxy are the only wolves in the series. But the Twisted Ones is not the only novel trilogy book that has connections to Security Breach. The Fourth Closet also has connections to it, and those ones are just as interesting, if not more interesting. In the Fourth Closet, we have William, who has been fixed up with the help of Baby. In the CDs, it's revealed that Vanessa is being manipulated by someone, and Patient 46 is later revealed to be the one manipulating Vanessa. If I'm correct about Patient 46 being Elizabeth in a new body, then that associates Baby with Vanessa, and Vanessa also looks similar to Elizabeth. In Fury's Rage, we see an image of Eleanor on the map of the final boss battle next to where we fight Vanny, further associated in the game version of Eleanor with Vanessa. The appearance of Eleanor in Fury's Rage to me told us from the start that she was in the games, which is why I don't really understand why people think Frailty showing that Eleanor is in the game's timeline proves Stitchline Games, because it has been clear she existed in the games for over a year. So with Vanessa being associated with Elizabeth, her being the one to help Afton adds up with Circus Baby being the one to help him in the Fourth Closet. William makes the fun times to kill kids and also uses Remnant to heal himself, and in Security Breach, William makes the Glitch Trap virus to possess Vanny, who kills kids, and also most likely makes Remnant to regenerate parts of Afton's body. At the end of the Fourth Closet, the Remnant amalgamation, an amalgamation of animatronics containing the missing children's spirits, realizes Afton is not their friend, and they throw him into the fire. In the Afton ending, the Blob, which is Molten Freddy, who in FNaF 6 contained the spirits of the missing children, at first is on William's side, attacking Gregory to stop him from opposing Afton's possession of Freddy. But then at the end, the Blob turns on Afton and attacks him, not to mention that he was in a burning down room. This shows that not only is the Blob Molten Freddy, but he also still contains the spirits that Molten Freddy had before the fire. They weren't set free. I've already done a whole last video on why Henry's plan almost definitely failed and why there was no way for it to even work in the first place, so go check that out if you haven't. And because the fire doesn't work, and because Remnant doesn't burn in fire, as I talked about in that video, then there's nowhere else for the missing children to go. There's also a decent amount of evidence suggesting that the bite victim is Glamrock Freddy rather than Michael, which I talked about in my Golden Freddy video. In that same video, I talked about all the reasons why when Freddy mentions his friends, he 100% must be referring to the Blob, and if the Blob is just agony like MatPat has led his worshippers to believe, then that line makes no sense. Just a friendly reminder, MatPat is not God. If I disagree with him, who cares, especially when his theory is bad anyway. Anyway, in my last theory, I also talked about how the song at the end of each episode of Freddy and Friends on Tour teases the character that we see in the glitchy static both throughout and at the end of the episode. In episode 1, the song talks about turning up the music and also this band continuing to rock forever and ever. The music is most likely referencing the puppet, either being in the Blob, in the staff bots, or possibly both, which I'll get back to in a second. But the line of "this band keeps rocking forever and ever" seems to imply that Freddy and his friends are still rocking to this day, to the time of Security Breach, meaning their spirits aren't free yet. And the fact that these songs tease the end static teaser implies that the missing children and puppet are associated with the Blob, and that adds up with everything else that we see. Now, I hear you guys already angrily smashing your keyboards, ready to call me a hack in the comments. You're a hack! But I'm going to answer a couple of questions, or rather bad arguments, people use to quote-unquote debunk my ideas about the Blob. A lot of people ask me why the missing children and Charlotte's spirits would actively attack Gregory, someone who looks a lot like the bite victim who was their friend. But the Fourth Closet actually answers this. The animatronics in the Blob are separate from the base Blob itself. Basically, the animatronics in the Blob are tangled into the wires, but they're still separate. They're not, like, combined together or anything. But the Fourth Closet actually gives us the answer as to why they would attack Gregory. If the animatronics in the Blob aren't literally combined with each other, and the missing children's spirits are, but the animatronics also have the same red eyes, it means they're all possessed by the same thing, which would mean the spirits are split up between multiple bodies just like they were in the Fun Times. When this happened in the Fourth Closet, the missing children lost some aspects of their memories, and they were kind of a lot stupider. In the previous books, the spirits were literally aware of who William Afton, their killer, was. Even at the mention of his name, the animatronics went crazy. So to see them working with him again, it's clear that something happened when the pieces of their spirits split. They don't remember as much, and that's shown towards the end of the book when Carlton is talking to Susie. When their spirits are put back together, though, they remember everything, including the truth about William. The truth is that William is the one who killed them, and that's when they turn on him. The reason the Funtimes kill kids in the fourth closet is because William is manipulating the missing children, because their fragmented spirits are fragile, and they're kind of weak-minded. The missing children believe that when they kill kids, they are actually getting new friends, which is revealed towards the end of the fourth closet right before Carlton reveals the truth to the kids. Given the parallels between Security Breach and the fourth closet, it would make a lot of sense that the same is what's happening here. Maybe they attack Gregory because they think he will be their friend if they do. And if you think I'm stupid for thinking this could even happen, it literally does in the fourth closet, and in that book the Funtimes are possessed in the same way as the Funtimes in the games, meaning all this is completely possible. It would make sense if they think Gregory will be their friend, but then realize that William is the truly evil one and the Blob attacks him. But that leaves the question of whether or not the puppet isn't the Blob. As I've talked about, when the pieces of a spirit's soul are split between multiple bodies, they basically become a bit stupid. They can't think straight. So if my theory about Charlotte being split between the Snaffbots is true, her mind would be in nearly hundreds of bodies, and it would be to the point where Charlotte isn't even aware anymore. It would make sense in that case for her to attack Gregory because she doesn't know any better. But the problem is the missing tear tracks on the puppet's mask and the Blob. That implies Charlotte isn't in the puppet's body at this point. But there is actually an explanation for this. Spirits are able to transfer into objects within close proximity of them, or that just come into contact with them. In the Stitch Wraith, Andrew possessed the battery pack, but the battery pack was inserted into the endoskeleton, and Andrew is able to transfer his spirit into it. These two objects are connected to each other, but they're not literally melted together or combined together or anything like that. They're not combined together, they're just confined together, just like the animatronics in the Blob. Throughout the series, there are only 3 characters that ever use tentacles: Nightmare On, the Blob, and the puppet. Nightmare On uses them in FNaF VR, and as I said in the last video, Fazbear Entertainment have used circuit boards from the original animatronics to make the VR experience animatronics act more like the originals. So it wouldn't be hard to believe that they gave Nightmare On tentacles because the puppet also has tentacles. In their literal final Fazbear Fright story, You're the Band, the puppet uses tentacles to wrap up Sylvia. So basically the only other character who uses tentacles in FNaF is the puppet. I mean, unless you count Eleanor, but those are literally made of blood, which is interesting on its own, but it doesn't match the Blob. But the puppet matches more closely. The Blob's tentacles are actually the wires of the thing, so it's possible that Charlotte's fragmented consciousness isn't in her own body anymore, but transferred into the body of the Blob. I don't think it's certain or anything that the puppet is in the Blob. I don't think tentacles automatically have to mean that it's the puppet, but to me it seems to add up. And the final thing that a lot of people argue is that the end of the fourth closet seems to show Afton and the Remnant amalgamation burning in the furnace and dying from that. But here's the thing. William is their killer. The kids wouldn't want to be set free if their killer is still around, and that's if they even could be. But furthermore, in the fourth closet, Afton's spirit actually appears in the Remnant world. Afton isn't only using the Remnant to heal himself, he is using himself to keep the Remnant functional. It seems likely that when a spirit possesses an animatronic, they aren't technically trapped. The problem with Happy's Day isn't that the spirits are trapped in the animatronics. The spirits are kinda stuck in there otherwise, but they can still be set free if they possess an animatronic. See, in FNaF 2, we see what people call the Save Them Massacre, where William kills 5 more kids. These spirits end up possessing the toy animatronics, and at the end of FNaF 2, the toys are scrapped. But the Save Them kids still inhabit the toys. In Happiest Day, we see 16 balloons, each balloon representing a spirit, meaning there's 16 spirits in Happiest Day. It would be really strange if the Save Them kids weren't included in that, so the Save Them kids have to be in Happiest Day, which hasn't happened yet, and we somehow haven't seen all these spirits again since FNaF 2, showing that they are still stuck in the toys, all this time. But they still managed to be set free by Happiest Day. What I'm trying to say is that the spirits can be set free even if they possess something, but they can't leave without closure. Charlotte can't leave without the missing children, the bite victim can't leave without getting revenge on Michael, and the missing children can't leave until they get revenge on William. When William finally does die in the series, that is when Happiest Day will happen, but it hasn't happened yet. To further this point, the fact that William is inside the remnant with all the missing kids likely means that he's keeping them here. Similar to the fact that William's spirit is in multiple places at once, both as Burn Trap, Glitch Trap, and is infecting a lot of different animatronics, keeping tabs on literally everything, Afton is keeping tabs on the missing kids. That's why when William finally does die at the end of the fourth closet, the spirits are set free, because he dies. The one thing that I myself questioned about this, though, is if Remnant doesn't burn in fire, and William in the fourth closet has Remnant in him, and Remnant prevents you from dying, then how could he have died there? I gave it some thought for a bit, but I eventually came to a conclusion that honestly seems pretty obvious now. The spirits choose. At the end of the book, Michael Brooks and the rest of the missing children choose to keep Carlton alive. Carlton was actually being killed by the Remnant, but the missing children chose to save him. So, what if Remnant actually naturally kills you? And when I say that, I don't mean the Remnant pendant is killing Jessica or whatever in Frailty. I'm saying that if there's Remnant actually injected into your system, that would kill you. Probably because it's literal metal, but because it very nearly does kill Michael and Carlton until the missing kids in both cases intervene. So if the missing kids believed Afton was their friend, the kids giving him a get-out-of-death-free card would make sense. But then realizing that Afton isn't their friend would clearly sever that connection and let the Remnant pump through his blood and the fire actually burn him alive. The kids would definitely do that. Hell, maybe Michael Brooks literally took away William's get-out-of-death-free card and just switched possession of it over to freaking Carlton. My whole point here is that Remnant doesn't burn in fire, but if it isn't in your system, it naturally kills you. It's the decision of the children inside the Remnant whether or not to keep you alive. If Afton is dead inside Springtrap, it would mean he isn't using Remnant, so the missing kids can't kill him by just severing their connection, only by actually attacking him, just like the Blob does in the Afton ending. But now, that all begs the question of what happens after the Blob attacks William. But I think I have a pretty good answer that could lead into the DLC and simultaneously the rise of Afton in said DLC, but also his true end and happiest day finally happening. Something weird about the Blob is that in the model there are 3 separate Bonnie arms. But not only that, all 3 of them are Bonnie's left arm. These belong to 3 different Bonnies, meaning that the animatronics Bonnie, Chica, and Mangle in the Blob, and maybe even Funtime Freddy and Baby, aren't the originals, but they are actually FNaF AR Fazbear Funtime Service animatronics. The interesting thing about the FNaF AR animatronics, though, is that they are controlled by Afton. So if the Blob has Glitch Trap infected items in it, does that mean that maybe William could end up taking back control of these items and therefore taking control of the Blob itself? We see the Afton amalgamation in Fazbear Frights. Why not in the games? It would make a lot of sense if Fazbear Frights really was setting up the amalgamation to be in the games in the future. It would make a lot of sense if Fazbear Frights really was setting up the amalgamation to be in the games in the future. In Princess Quest, we see Glitch Trap, but not Glitch Trap as we know him. This Glitch Trap has random squiggles all over the place, and eyes all over its body, similar to the Afton amalgamation is described in Epilogue 7 of Fazbear Frights. But if you actually compare the Blob and Princess Quest Glitch Trap, almost every single thing lines up. I made an image comparing the two of them, and so much added up. But here's the real nail in the coffin. At the end of Princess Quest 1, this amalgamation reaches out and grabs Cassidy with black tentacles, just like the Blob has. But there's more. In the third Tales from the Beeswax story named Under Construction, a lot of weird stuff happens. The whole story takes place within a dead girl's mind as she is trapped in an AR headset living in a dark reflection of the world, where literally the entire world is affected by cancer, and all the newborn babies are jelly blobs that combined together are born at an abnormal rate, grow at an abnormal rate, and multiply. The main character, Maya, doesn't realize that she's in a simulation, and she's completely appalled by the fact that she's the only one who saw how insane this situation is. After her entire family is killed, the jelly blobs flood into Maya's house and she tries to escape to her garage, forgetting that she hadn't even closed it before, and it was now full of jelly blobs. They cling to her, and strangely, even though she can't breathe or anything, she is still alive. She has no idea how she is still alive, and what's weird is that when she and the jelly blobs literally merge together, yeah, they merge together, and it feels as if they incorporated her into them, as if they had been seeking her out, as if she completed them. To me, this all seems to represent the idea of Afton and the Blob combining. While in the story Maya doesn't die because she's already dead and trapped in a simulation, it could be a representation of William Afton still being alive after all this time. Or, well, not alive, but just not free, and still kicking it despite being dead for like 50 years. As I mentioned before, both the remnant in the Blob and some of the animatronics in it contain fragmented pieces of William's soul. So, if Afton and the Blob combined together, it would be like the pieces of Afton's spirit are being reunited, like Afton completed the Blob, just like Maya completed the Jelly Blobs. So basically, stuff referred to as blobs coming together with someone who cannot die and who completes the blobs really seems to tie together with Afton and the Blob combining together to become the Afton amalgamation. So I think that's pretty damning evidence that in the DLC for Security Breach, we're going to be picking up where we left off in the Afton ending, and Afton will take control of and combine with the Blob and become the Afton amalgamation. But this idea comes from the books, and in the epilogue with the Afton amalgamation, Afton is actually killed. The puppet seems to be freed, and since she's freed in Happy's Day, that would mean Happy's Day would likely be happening here. And a future villain is also set up in that same epilogue. So maybe the DLC will actually be the end of William Afton as a villain, killing him off for good. Charlotte and the rest of the kids finally resting in Happy's Day, and setting up Elizabeth Afton in some new body to be the villain for upcoming games in the franchise. But that's another video I'm planning to make in the future. I want to do a rehash of my Balloon World theory from months ago, and talk about what the next FNaF game might be, what it might focus on, and what other kinds of games that we could see in the future of this franchise. But that's going to have to wait for after the next theory, where we will finally be coming to a definitive conclusion on the identities of Glamrock Freddy and Gregory, even if the most likely option isn't the most liked option. But anyways, guys, what did you guys think of this theory? Do you agree with me? Let me know in the comments what you think, and if you did enjoy this video, then please do leave a like and subscribe if you want to. But that's all for this video. And hopefully the Ruin DLC will also be all for Afton.